Welcome back to First Things First. In this episode, we're going to build one last chassis frame example. This time we're going to be using primarily X-Rail as our structural component, and it's going to be bound together in the corners with 1.5-inch channel. Let's go ahead and get started. So in the kit, you have 12-inch and 10.5-inch long X-Rail. And we're going to be using the 12-inch on the sides and 10.5-inch on the front and back. And then we're going to be using these 1.5-inch channel in the corners. And what we want to do is we want to be able to connect it directly to both X-rails without any additional components, which is easy enough to do by going right through the channel. But we also want to leave room to be able to put a motor mount on the back if we so choose. So we're going to be mounting them like this with the open side facing out. We always have the option of putting a 545 360, which we've covered in previous videos, on the end there, or if we so choose, or on the top. But various ways we could use this. But in this particular setup, eventually I'm going to be putting a motor mount on the back. And so I'm going to set it up this way. And it's going to be a quick and easy process. And it's going to give us several options that we could go with. I have two different size screws here. So I have 1/4 inch and 5/16. You have a little bit of leeway as far as what length of screw you use to go into the X-rail. The X-rail is going to be pre-tapped, and I'm going to go ahead and use 5/16 inch here. I feel like that's going to be long enough to be strong, and it's going to be easy to drive in because that'll easily fit within the depth of the tap. All right, that's one of the corners down. Let's just go ahead and do the same thing on the other 3 corners. So that's basically the frame that we're going to make, but we're going to go through and beef it up a little bit with some standoffs. These are 1.32 inch long standoffs, and you'll get some of these in your kit. And the inside width of the channel space there is 1.32 inch, so it fits perfectly within channel. You'll see us using these often to increase the rigidity and strength of the channel. And in this case, I want to make sure there's not going to be any sort of flex or wiggle within there. So I'm going to add 2 to each of these corners, one at just above the 1/2 inch hole and one below the 1/2 inch hole. And so that's going to really strengthen this up and make it really rigid, especially since these faces out here are where my motor mounts are going to be. You may have noticed on my workbench here, I've got some end nips, and if you have a pair of end nips lying around, they're a great way to work with these 1/4 inch OD round standoffs and the 1/4 inch OD round spacers. But generally, you're going to need to hold these more often than a spacer. And so if you need to reach in and hold one of these standoffs, and in this case, it's not going to be a very big deal, but in some cases, that can become very handy to have something to reach in there and hold that with. So the end nips are a great tool for that, even though that's not really what they're intended for. So if you have a pair laying around, it's a good idea to keep in mind that you can use them for that. It just keeps the standoff from rotating around when you want it to hold still if you're trying to back out a screw that's kind of tight within there. And if you don't have a pair, we do sell them on servocity.com in the hardware section under tools. So there we have our completed chassis frame built out of X-Rail. This is the last in the series of basic chassis frames, and we look forward to going on to the next section in the next video where we start to flesh out these chassis frames to make them into full-blown chassis with motors and wheels. But I just wanted to take a moment to highlight the reason we're showing you various different ways to go about it. And it comes back to sort of the core concept behind Actibotics is we want to have a large library of parts so that there's not just one correct way to do any particular task. You have options, and at first glance that might seem more complicated, but once you get in, you start to become familiar with the build system and the components, you start to see the benefits that that provides. It helps for any particular situation that you're in. There's going to be a component that's right for that situation, and almost all our components are very multi-purpose, and so we like the variety. We think that's key to creativity, and we think with our build system you could have many different teams using the same components or different components and end up with very different robots, and we think that's a great thing. And so that's the reason we wanted to show you 3 very different chassis frames. And in fact, those are just 3 of the many different ideas that we've had. And as you make more and more choices to build up the frame into the full-blown chassis and your chassis into a full-blown robot, there are just more and more chances for you to take different paths and end up with very different robots. So we hope you enjoy the series, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.